Hi, this is the first round of the 45th edition of FIDE Olympiad. It is Moroccan FIDE Master Jacques Silvelia versus Indian Super Grandmaster Arjun Erigesi. The reason I chose this game is to prove a point, and the point is that everyone can blunder, even the Super Grandmasters. Let's have a look at the game. But before we start, I have a special announcement which I'll be giving you towards the end of the video, so stick around till the end. Let's have a look at the game. Okay, the game starts with pawn to d4, knight to f6, pawn to c4, pawn to e6, knight to c3, bishop to b4. So we have the Nimzo Indian. Pawn to e3, pawn to b6. We have the Rubinstein variation. Knight to e2, knight to e4, pinning the knight. We have to unpin. So bishop to d2, knight captures, queen captures, and black castles. Pawn to a3, kicking the bishop. Bishop goes back to e7, pawn to g3, bishop to b7, attacking the rook across the diagonal. Pawn to e4, knight goes to c6, queen to d3. Now the reason behind queen to d3 is to guard this c4 pawn, because in a lot of variations bishop comes to a6 and this pawn is a weakness. So queen goes to d3, bishop to a6, pawn to b4. The idea is to play pawn to b5 and fork the bishop and the knight. Now in this position, black plays bishop takes on b4. So in move number 12, black is sacrificing a piece. This sacrifice is not actually correct, and white is winning. So the FIDE master is winning the game right now. Instead of this move, black should have played bishop to b7. Also possible is pawn to e5, but the line is very complicated. Let me show you. So after pawn to e5, pawn to b5, pawn captures the knight, pawn captures the knight, pawn captures the pawn. Now this pawn is on the 7th rank and black would want to capture it. So bishop goes to d6 so that the queen can capture it. But white is not going to leave it like that. So bishop goes to h3, guarding the pawn on d7 square. Now queen comes to g5. The idea is to play queen to h5 at some point and attack the bishop and maybe finally capture the pawn by playing rook to d8 and then capturing on d7 square. So that is the idea. Knight captures on c3, queen to h5, bishop goes to f5, pawn to g6. We are attacking the bishop, but white can simply ignore it because knight is coming to d5 with the idea of knight to f6 check, attacking the king and the queen. King goes to g7, pawn to g4. Now we are attacking the queen. Why the line is complicated is because after the queen moves from this square, queen is coming to c3 square, the diagonal is exposed, the knight is jumping to f6 square. So this game is equal, but black has to play very precisely from here on. So it is not feasible to calculate in such depth. So this line can be ignored. Better alternative is bishop to b7. Now after this, bishop goes to g2, pawn to e5, pawn to d5, knight goes back to b8. You might say, why is the knight going back to b8? How is it good for black? So black is going to play pawn to d6 and then knight to d7. That's how black is going to develop. So after castles, pawn to d6, and the idea is to play knight to d7 in the future. So that was a possibility. But in the game, after pawn to b4, bishop captured, then pawn captures, knight captured back on b4, queen to b1, attacking the knight, pawn to c5, guarding the knight. So in this position, rook captured on a6 square, which is a bad move. White should not do that. Maybe white did that because white thought of this line. After knight to c1, queen is coming to f6 square, and then queen is looking at f3 square, and it is also looking at d4 square. And white is not able to guard the two squares at the same time. The only piece that can do it is this queen on b1 by playing queen to d3. But the d3 square is guarded by the knight, so queen can't go there. So maybe because of that, white decided to capture the bishop on a6 square. Instead of knight to c1, white should have seen knight to f4. In this variation, the bishop is guarding that pawn, and this is one way the game could have progressed. So after bishop to g2, white can simply castle, and white will take the advantage because white has an extra piece for 2 pawns. and 2 pawns can be managed pretty easily, especially in this position. So that's what happened. So rook captured on a6 square, knight captured back, pawn to d5, knight to b4, bishop goes to g2, pawn captures, knight captures, pawn captures, rook goes to e8. Now black is not allowing white to castle the king, so queen comes to d3, pawn to b5, king castles, pawn to b4. Now the only way black can actually have some say in this situation is by having some advantage on the queen side. The way black is going to do that is by pushing these pawns towards the end of the board. So pawn to d6, rook to b8, knight goes to f4, queen to f6. Now in this position, white should play knight to d5, which white did not. White played queen to b3, which is a bad move because black gets to capture this, and the position is more or less even. If knight goes to d5 square and queen captures, then it is better for white because then white can simply capture on b4 square, and after queen captures, knight captures, pawn push. It is white who will be pushing for the win because white has 2 pieces for the rook. And this pawn cannot do much because knight can simply take care of that. Rook is there, bishop can simply sit on this square, and things are fine for white. So this should have happened, but it did not happen. White actually played queen to b3, which is a bad move. So after queen captures, we have bishop to d5, queen to a6, rook to d1, rook to e7, king to g2, queen to a3. Now black just wants to exchange pieces. I mean, if you capture pawn captures, then if let's say rook comes to a1 square, then we have rook to b3, bishop let's say goes to f3 square, we have pawn to g5 attacking the knight, and once the knight moves, knight can't go to these 2 squares. Knight can go to this square, by the way, but in that case also we have rook to e6. Rook is simply coming to d6 square, a6 square. All these squares are covered by the rook, and black will be winning in this position. If knight goes to this square, then again we have pawn to h6, simply guarding the pawn, and then again the same idea, rook is coming to these squares. So black will be winning in this position. So this is something that white should not get into, and white rightly so played queen to b1, pawn to b3, queen goes to f5 square, queen to a6, knight goes to d2 so that it can guard the b2 square, queen goes to f6, queen captures, pawn captures, king goes to f3, pawn to b2. Now a very simple idea for black is to just pin the knight, and then probably try something like pawn to b1, rook goes to b1, rook pins the knight, bishop goes to e4, so that if bishop captures, then they can pick up the knight, and if pawn captures, then we have pawn to c4, pawn captured and pawn to c4. Rook captures. Now don't capture the rook because then you will be losing the game. That's bad because you're not losing, but it's at least even. So after rook captures, rook goes to a3, keeping the pin. Rook goes to d2. White can't really save this knight right now, so black can play whatever black wants. So king goes to g7, improving the position of the king. King goes to f4. Now we have to capture, so pawn captures. Bishop goes to f5. Rook goes to a4 check. King goes to f3. Rook goes to e5, and it was in this position on move number 40 that white resigns the game. I hope you enjoyed the game. And coming back to that announcement part. So I'm thinking of covering as many games as I can in this Olympiad. So stick around.